Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic. Let's do it. What's the scariest, creepiest incident you've ever seen, but no one believes you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was traveling in Colombia 4 years ago. We spent the day horseback riding through the hills. It was one of the best days I've ever had. Literally for 8 hours. At the end of the day, the four of us hitched our horses, paid our tab, and went home. It's now 9 p.m. and pitch black. This part of Colombia has all dirt roads and no streetlights. My friend who drove us is white, wealthy, and drives a Land Rover. Sticks out like a sore thumb in Colombia and is a target, so you have to be careful. About 5 minutes into the ride back, we're in the middle of nowhere in the darkness and hear a huge thud. Something hit the car. My friend slams on the brake, confused and wanting to get out and look. Another friend, who was Colombian, yells, "Drive, drive, drive!" My friend floors it, and we get the hell out. Apparently, one way they target you there is to make you think you hit something by throwing a rock at your car. When you get out to look, they stab you, take your car and possessions, and drive off. I still remember seeing these white eyes in the darkness about 8 feet from my window as we were driving off. That look still haunts me sometimes. I'm a 5'10" medium build man. I've been in some seriously messed up, scary situations. That's why this one is so unbelievable. One day I was walking down Division Street in Portland, Oregon. Middle of the day, relatively busy street. And there was a tiny young girl who couldn't have been more than 14 or 15 years old, 5 feet and 80 pounds. Her hair was black with long bangs covering half of her face. She has a bit of a goth look to her, and a bit of a tweaker look as well, but not at all wasted away like many tweakers you see. She was just standing at the bus stop. As I walked by, we made eye contact, and this little girl half my size gave me a look that frightened me in a way that I've never felt before or since. I felt like a tiny, helpless fly, and she was a giant, hungry spider ready to eat me. That's the exact image that popped into my head. I practically walked off the sidewalk and into traffic without thinking about it, so I wouldn't have to pass within a few feet of her. It still chills me to think about it. There was a main road about a 2-minute walk from my house. My road entered it as a T-junction. The main road was between my house and the village. I was out with friends in the village one day, but I was compromised with my parents, and they said they would pick me up at the cross the road with me at around 3 when I was to come home. 3 rolls around, and I'm sitting on the side of the road for a lot longer. My parents fell asleep. So I'm sitting directly opposite where my road enters the main road, and I see this car speeding down my road directly towards me. I run out of the way, and without an ounce of slowing down, this car flies straight out across the main road and into the field. If I had not moved, it would have plowed me straight down. I thought, F this shit, crossed the road and ran home. I told my parents, and they didn't believe me. The car was gone before I could show them. F that. It's so difficult to explain, and it'll get lost anyway. I rarely tell this story because of how unreal it sounds. Nobody ever believed me, so I stopped telling them. Between the ages of 4 and 5, I can pinpoint it because of where I lived at the time. I also have a very good memory and can remember as far back as Christmas 1986. I was born at Christmas 84. What I can only describe as a large orange ball used to visit me almost every day, in the morning. But I feel it's crucial to explain that it wasn't the first thing in the morning upon waking. I wasn't dreaming, I wasn't sleep drunk, etc. It wasn't some kind of imaginary friend. I was effing terrified of it. And my childhood was happy and trauma-free. I wasn't blessed with a particularly active imagination. I've also never had any health, vision, or sensory problems. It was about the size of a beanbag seat, so rather big but was spherical. It had a slightly fuzzy outline. Its exterior looked like it would feel like a piece of carpet if you touched it. Not that I would have. It floated midair around 1 foot off the ground. It just floated around the same spot. It didn't move around. It only ever appeared on the landing, nowhere else. It didn't speak or make any noise. It had eyes and a mouth. Both were really cartoonish, but in a creepy way. It just grinned at me and didn't do anything else. It'd disappear after a couple of minutes. I'd open my bedroom door, and it'd be there. Terrified, I'd just peep at it until it eventually effed off for the day. Nobody else ever saw it. If I called my mom, my brother, etc., it'd disappear. And, of course, nobody believed me. One day, it just stopped coming for good. I went to college in rural Pennsylvania, half in the middle of a state school. All our dorms were at the top of a hill, pretty much, and behind them were woods that stretched fairly far before the next road or a graveyard. We used to go back into the woods and hang out, drink, and obviously not do drugs. Well, one time, I was walking back to our normal hangout spot in order to obviously not do drugs. I heard what sounded like branches crunching, so I, in a panic, thought it was the police, and to hide behind a tree. Moments later, down the trail, some older-looking man with a real bushy beard came walking onto the trail. Dude has a tree-cutting axe and some sort of a long knife, and he's got a sled behind him, dragging what was hopefully a deer on it. Thankfully, there was a river nearby where I could clean my pants out before going back to my dorm. I never went into the woods after that, and everyone thought I was just making shit up as an excuse to not be cool. Well, it's a good thing you were there definitely not doing drugs, because you definitely don't want to do drugs, especially when you're in college not doing drugs. But could a bearded axeman be walking through the woods? Yeah, I do. I was home alone with my cousin back when I was a young teen. We were sitting in my living room. I'm in my old Victorian-style cottage. It was built in the 1800s. This house has a large entryway leading into a nice staircase. Before the stairs reach the second floor, there's a landing and a small claustrophobic staircase leading down to the back of the house. The staircase was used for servants and the like, so we took the calling to it the slave stairs. A bit inappropriate, but we were kids. Anyway, we're sitting in my living room late at night with my dog next to us, and we hear the loudest crash. It lasts for at least 5 seconds. The best way I can describe it is a huge plastic stereo falling down those stairs. It sounded large, heavy, and somewhat hollow. We both freeze, then rush back to the small confined staircase to find absolutely nothing there. It was so surreal because the crash was so loud, it echoed throughout our house. We never found out what it was. We looked through the whole upper floor to see if something fell. About a year later, we were doing renovations to a bedroom right above the stairs. We start to break down a wall, only to find a sealed compartment between the bedroom and the hallway. It looks like a sealed closet. Inside, we find lots of old newspaper clippings. I don't remember the date, but none of them stood out to me, as well as a handful of old newspapers. The creepiest thing by far was a Victorian-style portrait of a woman, framed and just propped up against the corner. We had a very similar one hanging downstairs from when we got the house, and we theorized them to be previous owners. I need to go back there someday. I was getting ready to leave on a date with my then girlfriend. We were getting into my Jeep out in front of her place, and I started the engine, and she said she forgot something inside. It was dark and raining a little, so she ran inside and I got my phone out to pass the time. My car had an auto lock feature, so the doors locked while she was inside, and I just continued looking at my phone. Eventually, out of the corner of my eye, I see her come out of the house and come up to the passenger side window. And without looking up from my phone, I hit the unlock button to let her in, except she didn't come in. A few seconds passed by and I glanced up to see what was wrong, and she wasn't there. Nobody was there. She came out a few moments later and got in the car to find me kind of shocked and asked what had happened. I told her, and she thought I was messing with her. I was so freaked out I was shaking. I did absolutely see someone come out of the house and approach the car in my peripheral vision, so much so that I reached over and unlocked the car thinking it was her. When I think back, it was definitely a female figure about her height with the same color hair, dressed in warm clothing, just as she was then and that night. It came to the window and looked at me, and thinking it was her, I unlocked the car to let her in. This was the most real ghost experience I've had. Me and a friend decided to go skate at a nearby golf course. It was probably around 1 or 2 in the morning. On the way back, going down a long, dark, and heavily wooded 2-lane road on a super quiet night, we both hear some jumping in the trees, kind of off in the distance. We thought it was a raccoon or some other type of wildlife, no big deal. We laugh it off and continued chatting until we hear it again. But instead of it being 30 or 40 feet away like it was seconds ago, it sounded more like 10 feet away, in the trees directly beside us. Debris was falling to the ground. Heavy rustling in the tree sounded like it was bending and creaking. It sounded like it was a fairly big animal. I don't know how it could have crept up on us like it did as fast as it did, but when I looked at the trees, where it was coming from, it was dead still. There was no tree movement, no branches were swaying, and nothing that would signal an ape-type creature was hurtling through them, aside from the noise we both heard. Naturally, we were full-on sprinting. The tree line eventually ended at a nearby apartment complex, and we made it home safe. I still get unnerved going down that road, though. No one believes me besides the friend who witnessed it with me. To put this into context, this takes place in Puerto Rico. It's a very vivid nightmare that I still panic about to this day. It's pretty long, so bear with it, please. I was sleeping in my parents' bed and felt myself float out of my body. I walked off the bed and looked back to see myself sleeping. I started walking out of the house and phased through the door. It felt like I floated all the way to the beach, which was a 5-minute drive from the house, and just walked on the sand. I was calm and was just walking along the beach until the waves got louder and more violent. Something was calling me into the ocean, and the moment my feet touched the water, I felt a feeling of panic overtake my body. My body felt like it was invaded by ants, and I looked around the beach to see it get darker and more ominous. On the horizon, there was a garbled sound, but I understood it as a sign to get out of there. The sky went from dark blue of night to grayish blue hue, and behind me, I felt hands push me all the way to the house. If I tried to look back to see who or what was pushing me, my neck would have felt like it was getting choked. I would be pinched or slapped. Someone would pull my ears, or a voice would say, "Stop that, or it'll get worse." The walk back to my house was not like floating, pleasant journey that I had to get to the beach. The walk would have been peeking from their houses, and for some reason, I felt a mixture of fear and shame. When I got back to the house, the being that pushed me for the trip back took my shoulders and violently spun me around. It was a tall, pale guy with holes for eyes and bloody gums. His hands looked like a different pair of hands stitched on his arms. And he was naked, but his torso and legs were riddled with fungus, looked like stringy mushrooms and maggots. He got really close to my face and yelled, "Don't do that again or you'll stay with me next time." I woke up in a cold sweat, but here's the kicker. I woke up hearing scratching on our wooden walls, and my parents woke up right after. It was 3 a.m., and my entire self felt different. It was like all my innocence was lost. For months after that, I suffered from insomnia, night terrors, reliving the same nightmare, but with the guy saying different things, and vivid memories of that night. My parents only remember the occasionally have the same dream starting out, but force myself to wake up from fear. I don't know what caused this shit. I never had a traumatic experience before that, and I had a normal childhood. These were literally no anxiety in my life to cause a drama or dream like that. I don't know where all this fear came from, but after that dream, I didn't feel the same. It was actually this summer that I was visiting my girlfriend who lives near the big city where I live. It was a hot sunny day, and it was getting dark outside. It could have been around 8 p.m. We decided to go on a walk and find a quiet spot for some fun times, ideally somewhere more secluded. So we found an old biking trail that we decided to follow and see where it would take us. After a good 20 minutes of walking, we thought that something was a bit off. Suddenly I noticed that it got dark really quickly, and that I couldn't really see all that well. And it wasn't just me. My girlfriend suddenly said, "Huh, where did the moon go?" I looked up, and for sure we could not see the moon in the sky or any stars. Then the world around us just went all quiet, like really, really quiet. It was like a background was straight up muted. Well, until it suddenly wasn't in the distance. We could hear this out of this world, almost alien like screech that I can only describe as sounding like a high pitched growl coming out of something very, very sick, going through immense agony. My girlfriend turned around. I grabbed her hand and we started running all the way back to our house. The whole time it was dark as shit, and we kept hearing that growl behind our backs. It was not fading away either. It sounded like it was keeping up with us the whole time, maybe even getting closer. We successfully made it to her house without getting killed, but man, was that the only scary experience? The thought that I was cock-blocked by some demonic spawn of Satan is kind of funny to me now. Shit only happens to me sort of way. I was about 11 when this happened. I remember laying in bed and watching TV one night. I just got cable TV in my room and was forcing myself to stay up late to watch Andrew Dice Clay on Saturday Night Live. I kept dozing off, but would wake myself up to watch the then controversial comedian. As I lay there, I had a feeling that someone was staring at me from behind through my bedroom window. You know that mixture of a bit of fear and anxiety together? That's what I was feeling. I convinced myself that it was just my imagination and to quit being a puss and roll over and look, so I did. And I saw exactly what I feared I would see. There was a guy, who I guess had to be 6'4", staring at me in my bedroom window. This is literally one of those childhood manifested fears from your imagination that never happened. But it did happen, and it scared the voice right out of me. I froze solid for a second and couldn't move. I tried to scream, but I was only able to let out a frightened mumble. The dude took off almost immediately. I was finally able to get my voice working, and I let out the biggest scream of my life. My dad ran up the stairs from his basement bedroom, probably thinking something horrible must have happened. I told him there was somebody looking at me through my bedroom window. Actually, all I could say was, there was someone looking at me through my bedroom window. Well, windows, some man. I was pretty hysterical. My dad calmed me down, and he kept saying that I must have been dreaming. I used to suffer from night terror, so I think he just chalked it up as that. He went outside to check for someone, but it was a half-hearted attempt, and I'm sure it was more for my benefit to console me than for him to think he would find someone. He teased me about it jokingly from time to time, but otherwise it was dropped. But here I am, a 42-year-old man, and I still never questioned that it was real. Also, I prefer the blinds closed all the way at night. A group of friends and I enjoy exploring abandoned buildings, and being from Scotland, there are quite a few to choose from. Most being old nursing homes, older hospitals, Victorian buildings, and old farm buildings. Most of them look and feel like the start of every horror movie you've ever watched, and it's very easy to spook yourself if you let your imagination wander and listen to all the sounds of wind blowing through broken windows and floors creaking from the weather. It's not very often that we encounter another person when we explore these buildings, as we're very careful about not disturbing buildings that may be occupied by homeless people or squatters, and we generally watch the building for 10 to 15 minutes before we enter to be sure we are alone. One evening, we're at a large Victorian-era care home that was burned down in the 1960s, and we had heard reports on an urbexing forum of it being an insurance job. So the whole thing is a bit sketchy. It has 4 floors. The top one has the flooring totally removed, and the bottom one is a basement where the staff used to live. We explored the ground floor and found some old tables set up with chairs, nothing too exciting. And it's starting to get dark. We walked to the top of the stairs leading to the basement, which consists of long tunnels splitting off into rooms on each side. At the end of the tunnel is a young girl, maybe late teens, dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, who gives us a follow me gesture, then turns and runs into one of the rooms without a word. Instinctively, I want to follow, but something just feels totally wrong. She seemed far too calm, and although it was dull, the only lights being from our shitty torches and holes in the brickwork above, she seemed to be smirking. We all noped the F back up the stairs onto the first floor, and as I got to the top stair, I heard someone on the landing from the first floor shushing someone else pretty sternly, a very loud shh. We took off and jumped in the car, expecting people to chase after us, but we never saw anyone after that. We've been back a few times since, and it's always felt very creepy.